Aer Lingus business class has a lot of different seat types, and they're definitely not made equal. So what's the experience like when you're in the worst of these options? Is it worth your money? And can the onboard service make up for any shortfalls in the seat? Well, thanks to a seat change at the gate today, I'm about to find out. And not only that, but once we arrive in Dublin, I'll take a connecting flight on Aer Lingus' short-haul subsidiary, Airlines. Let's get going! Today I'm flying out of New York JFK Airport, and Aer Lingus operate from Terminal 7. I actually arrived via Blade helicopter transfer, which I will be making a separate video of on the channel, but safe to say definitely one of the best airport transfer experiences I've had. Once over at the terminal, there was a separate queue at check-in for business class, but it was a little bit slow going just to two large groups that were checking in at the time. But eventually, I was all checked in through to Newcastle via Dublin. I then headed through security, where there was a bit of a line to get through the initial document check for security, but once I cleared that I was able to use the TSA pre-check line for the first time since getting global entry, and I breezed straight past everyone, and was then on the hunt for a lounge. Walking through Terminal 7, it didn't strike me as having that much going on, to be honest, so I just followed the sign straight for the lounge and went straight there. The lounge was a very peaceful and relaxing place, with plenty of comfy seats and lounges around. There was also a dining area with these private booths that quite reminded me of the Concord dining at BA's lounge. However, the food options were a little bit on the limited side. The buffet was primarily serving sandwiches and salad, but crisps and cookies were also available elsewhere. But I was told that hot food would be served from 2 hours before departure, and I was here quite early, so for now I'll just have to settle for what was there. There was also a decent selection, albeit not too extensive, of beer, wine, champagne and spirits. I grabbed a couple of sandwiches, a pack of jalapeno crisps that I'd really enjoyed the previous day in the Amtrak lounge, and I also went for a glass of the Charles Lafite champagne. Thankfully the sandwiches are really tasty, and I did enjoy that champagne too. And then I finished off that meal with a cookie. And I then relocated to one of the incredibly comfy sofas that they had dotted around the place. Probably some of the comfiest airport lounge seating I've had, just felt like being in someone's living room. And I passed a couple of hours here getting a bit of work done, watching some YouTube. I did grab some of the hot food when it was put out and it was quite nice, albeit not an extensive amount of choice. And not long after though, it was time to go and board the flight. When I got over to the gate, the situation seemed to be a bit of a mess with a mass of people crowding around, you could barely move. But thankfully it wasn't too long after I got there before they called business class passengers to board. When they scanned my ticket it buzzed and they handed me a new boarding pass. Unfortunately my seat had been reallocated. I didn't have a great seat to begin with, but it turns out they reallocated me to the worst type of seat in the cabin. So the seat layout is staggered 1-2-2 and then 1-2-1, with three main different types of seats. The one you really want, especially if you're travelling solo like I am today, is the throne seat, which benefits from storage and side tables on either side of the seat due to the placement of the foot cubbies of the seat behind you. If you can't get those, you want the individual window seats to the left of the cabin, and if you can't get those, as was the case for me, then you'll end up in the twosome seats, but even these aren't made equal, with some getting more storage than others. I chose 1D, which seemed to have better storage than the seat next to it, but I was then bumped to the inferior 2D. Apparently this was due to the late addition of an infant on the flight whose parents needed to be in the front row, and of course they proceeded to cry loudly for much of the flight, the child not the parent, that is. As I made my way through the cabin, I looked on in envy at the other superior seats that I wasn't able to get before arriving over at mine. The actual seat itself looked a good size and looked comfortable, but immediately seemed lacking in a lot of modern business class features, especially when it comes to privacy. Waiting at my seat was a bottle of water, the bedding, an amenity kit, and the menu for today's flight. Taking my seat I noticed tons of legroom and it did feel spacious, but it was completely lacking privacy, feeling very exposed to the aisle. Under the armrest was a decent sized storage pocket, but it is worth noting that the other seats do have more than this. Upon the side table above this there was the amenity kit and the menu for today's flight. We'll take a proper look at both of those in a bit. Seat controls were under here, and the in-flight entertainment controller was hidden away in this section. Further seat controls were over on this panel, which wasn't the best location as I did keep bumping it with my elbow, and next to this was the in-flight power, plus a reading light and a bottle of water. The tray table is deployed from here. I did originally think that this was a privacy screen, but nope, this is where the tray table comes from. I did initially think it seemed like it would be something that would fold over, but you do actually just twist it round to swivel it into position. And then next to this we have one of the worst things about this seat. That privacy partition is all you get, it does not extend. There was a further minor bit of storage space underneath the in-flight entertainment screen. That had the headphones for today's flight, which we'll try in a bit, and underneath in the foot cubby was the bedding. Finally, the seat also had a coat hook, and there are individual reading lights and air vents above every seat. I had a quick look at the menu and it's looking fairly good. Drinks was looking decent, I'd be well catered for with an old fashioned. The rest of the options seem fairly standard though. Some nice looking options for the meal too though, and I was looking forward to that. I think I would have happily had any of the main course options. And whilst I was looking at the menu, the cabin crew came around and offered a glass of champagne. I've got to say, on the first sip of this I wasn't too convinced, I didn't think it was the nicest. But it did grow on me by the end, and when the glass was empty I was offered a top up which I decided to take, and I thought it was a really nice service touch that they did offer that top up. In fact, they almost insisted, the crew doing a lot to win me over with the service already. The in-flight entertainment screen was a decent size and it was quite responsive to the touch. Not super extensive, but there were plenty of recent releases. It's just a shame there are no cameras on board, since I'll not get my usual takeoff views, especially when the woman over at the window seemed to insist on keeping her window shades closed. Right, let's have a look what's in this amenity kit. We have socks, an eye mask, earplugs, a pen, a dental kit, a lip balm and moisturiser from Joe Brown, which is a brand I don't know, but all seem decent quality, nothing too special, but not bad at all. As the cabin was prepared for takeoff, I was quite amused by how many people were being asked by cabin crew to put their shoes back on. Keep your shoes on for takeoff and landing, people. If there's an emergency evacuation, you're going to want them on. We pushed back on time as a manual safety demonstration was completed. I can't remember the last time I've seen that on a wide body rather than just having the video safety demonstration. We seemed to be in a bit of a queue to take off as we just sat on the runway for a very long time, and eventually the captain came on to announce that we had been number 15 in the queue. Eventually, we were on our way. A few months ago, I needed a bag that I could use to carry around my camera and a few accessories when I'm making these videos. And I had a look around online and I ended up buying this crossbody bag from TomTok. I found it really useful, it's a great size, loads of different storage compartments in here so I could keep things organised, and I could even use the strap to attach my microphone. So I was really happy with it, so I was delighted when TomTok reached out to me about sponsoring today's video. They were also nice enough to send me their new Navigator T66 lightweight backpack, which I've now been using on my last 8 flights. This lightweight version is the perfect size to use as a personal item when you're travelling on full service airlines and as an underseat bag on the budget airlines. That made it perfect for today's journey, as although I'm flying in business class, I'm going to be connecting onto a flight on a smaller plane with very restrictive carry-on space. The thing I like best is that there are so many great organisation features, from the straps to easily compress the bag to reduce its size, all the different pockets and sections. And I love the way you can access the main section of the bag in 2 different ways, so it is always really easy to access what you need really quickly. There's really great quality zips too, and it's a comfortable bag to wear, or if you don't want to carry it, it can be easily hooked onto the handle of your suitcase. And all of this for a really great value price. So get your bag from TomTok using the link in the description, and for a limited time only get 20% off when you use code CHARLES20 at checkout. Now let's carry on with the flight. Whilst waiting for takeoff, I decided to start watching a film since I wouldn't have my usual window view. I tried the provided earphones, but they weren't the best, a bit flimsy and didn't seem to have any noise cancelling, and not the most comfortable to wear either, but I did stick with them for the duration of the film. Once up in the air, I kicked my shoes off and I found that they were able to easily fit in the storage cubby to the side of the seat. So despite my early complaints about lack of storage, it was looking pretty good so far. I then decided to get the seat reclined. Now that did present a couple of drawbacks. I think firstly, the recline position shifts the seat forward so that I was ahead of the already limited privacy partition. And aside from the leg rest and the lumbar, the level of individual adjustment isn't quite on par with other business class seats. I did try out the massage function, but you could barely tell that it was actually on. Vouchers were handed out for free Wi-Fi, which is greatly appreciated when some other airlines might still charge you $20 in business class. However, the connection and quality weren't the most stable. And then, about 40 minutes after takeoff, the drink service started and I went for an old-fashioned. This comes from a can, and the cabin manager who was doing the service left me a second can to work away with. And despite coming from a can, it was pretty damn good. And I was also given a glass of water and some crackers with chutney, which were all pretty nice. Definitely made a nice change from the usual nuts. Unfortunately at this point the in-flight entertainment did go down. The crew reset it, but it did take a while to resolve. Whilst waiting for that to get fixed, I made a quick pit stop in the loo, which was pretty standard. The only extra business class amenities were a Voya lotion and a Joe Brown soap. Yeah, pretty standard, but no complaints. Back at my seat in around half an hour after we'd had the initial drink service, my tray table was then set for dinner. The crew offered me some more ice for my glass and I topped up my drink. And it wasn't a long wait before my starter arrived. To start, I'd gone for the soup. This was a celeriac soup accompanied with some bread and butter. Some strong branding going with the tablecloth, the tray table, the napkin, and even on the cutlery itself. The soup, I've got to say, was absolutely delicious. It really surprised me. My only gripe again is about the seat. The distance from the seat and tray table is quite far, which is quite perilous with soup, so I did have to lean over quite a lot whilst eating. But I managed the impossible and I didn't spill on myself at all. And the crew also came around and brought me another piece of bread to mop up the soup. It had been a fantastic start to the meal, and as I was eating I noticed the crew being incredibly proactive, walking around the cabin to offer drink top-ups. Next up to me was the beef short rib, served with black garlic mashed potato, sautéed Swiss chard, and roast butternut squash. All of it absolutely delicious. A nice sweet barbecue sauce on the short rib and the buttery mash was excellent. Again, great service from the crew when they came round again, offering me another drink. I went for another old fashioned and was told that was going to be the last one that was on board. For dessert, I opted for the Bailey's tiramisu. I thoroughly enjoyed every single bite of all three courses of this meal, and each plate was left completely clean, which I don't think ever happens to me on flights. And while there may not have been too much that was particularly fancy about the meal, I do think it's actually all around the best meal I've had on a transatlantic flight so far. In fact, I enjoyed it so much that when the crew once again asked if there was anything else they could get me, I asked if it would be possible to get the cheese course as well, and they were very happy to provide this. Again, there was nothing too special here, and a disappointing lack of blue cheese, but again, it was all very nice, and the chutney enhanced the flavours of the fairly basic cheese choices. Once I was done with the meal, I finished up watching Ford vs Ferrari before it was time to go get some sleep. But it shows how much I was enjoying this flight that I hadn't realised how close we were getting to the end of it. At this point, the in-flight map showing just 2 hours 20 from our arrival into Dublin, so not a lot of time to get some sleep here. The pillow and blanket provided were both very good, however there's no mattress pad and the seat was pretty firm to lie on in the absence of this. I'm a side sleeper and I did actually find it was hurting my hip quite a lot when I woke up from sleeping on my side on such a firm seat. Or is that just me getting old? It was also a little bit tight around the legs, but far from the worst I've experienced. And I did actually manage to fall asleep very easily. Unfortunately, waking up was a lot more challenging. I awoke to an announcement that we would soon be arriving into Dublin. The cabin lights were switched on and we were asked to put our seats upright as the crew then came round to serve breakfast. This was a bacon roll with a pastry. I've got to say, the bacon roll surprised me. It was actually quite good. It didn't look like much, but it was quite tasty. I just wish I had the appetite to actually enjoy it. I was still pretty full from dinner, and I was feeling pretty rotten from the lack of sleep. The actual flight times for this one were pretty terrible for sleep, to be honest. It departed at 5 PM New York time, so we were coming into land at what would have been 11 PM in New York, or now 4 AM in Dublin due to the time difference, so it's a real challenge to balance when exactly to manage to get some sleep. I wasn't tired at all early in the flight, but I definitely was by the time we landed, and I still have one more flight to go before I get home, so make sure you stick around for that. And as we do make our landing and we arrive through Dublin Airport, let's talk about the cost. I needed a one-way flight, and as you may know, the airlines often charge ridiculous prices for these, and in this case, Aer Lingus were asking $9,978 at the time of booking. Crazy money. Instead, via the BA website I used Avios. It was just $57,750 Avios plus £113.40, and that includes the cost of my onwards connection from Dublin to my home in Newcastle. That is a fantastic price point. As much as the seat may not have been as good as other business class seats, for the price I paid it's excellent value, and there's still plenty to like about the seat, and obviously it's still infinitely better than sitting down at the back of the plane. It's just horrendous value if you do pay the full cash fare. If instead I'd done this trip with BA via Heathrow for the same date, it would have been 80,000 Avios plus £175. That's just 24,000 more points plus an additional £61.60 in cash. The BA Club suite would have been a better seat than the one I ended up with in Aer Lingus, but a throne seat with Aer Lingus would have been an easy winner for me, especially given the superior food and drink and the service from the crew that I received on this flight when I compare it to recent similar flights with BA. Arriving at the Aer Lingus Lounge in Dublin, I got a warm welcome and made my way through the lounge. There was loads of comfy seats available, a buffet of food that I definitely couldn't face, and plenty of drinks available too. Over upstairs there were showers, further seating and coffee, and I decided to grab a mocha and sit in one of the pod chairs to just have somewhere private to kill the time. My onwards flight to Newcastle was due to depart at 7:20am and will be on an ATR 72-600 with Aer Lingus Regional, also known as Emerald Airlines. So that meant a good couple of hours to kill here in the lounge. I was definitely struggling a bit, but I managed to just about hold myself together for the few hours before it was time to board. That lounge was great initially, but I've got to say it did get very busy by the time I left. There was then a very annoyingly long wait out the gate area. Boarding didn't commence until 15 minutes after it should have closed. But finally we were loaded onto a bus before eventually making my way on board and taking my seat over at seat 1A just in time for when we were supposed to be setting off. Space in this seat was pretty tight, even in this exit row. It probably didn't help that I had quite a big bloke sat next to me who was spilling over the seat a bit, but I basically just leaned towards the window, took in some of the views, and to be honest kept falling asleep and waking back up again. I was very ready to land into Newcastle, just grab my luggage and get home for a nap. The flight times were definitely a bit of a killer of this one overall, which definitely lessened the enjoyment of the journey, and my seat situation on both flights was subpar for business class, but the service, the food and drink on the long haul flight, plus the great value I got for the trip using avios, I would be very happy to fly with Aer Lingus again, particularly if I can get those nicer flight times or a better seat available. I'd really love to be able to fully enjoy the onboard service with them without then having to deal with the knock-on effect of the extreme tiredness. A big thanks to my Patreon supporters for helping me to make these videos. Thank you to everyone for watching, and if you'd like to see how this compares to the aforementioned BA business class, check out this video next. And don't forget 20% off on TomTop bags, link in the description. Thanks again, and hopefully I'll see you all in the next one.